Monday, the 23rd of February 2026. Good afternoon, Yaoundé. Good afternoon, Cameroon. Good afternoon, Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the 2 p.m. news on Royal FM. Operation Sparrowhawk 20 years after Gerard Ondondong and Gilles-Roger Belinga are free after both serving a 20-year prison term for mismanagement of public funds.
One of the main problems about this Operation Sparrowhawk is that some people who could have been caught by the very Sparrowhawk are the ones giving directives to the Sparrowhawk.
Plus, Professor Maurice Kamto has in an outing decried the confiscation of the late Anise Ekane's remains out of Cameroon. Mexico's notorious drug lord El Mencho has been killed during a military raid. And in sport, Hamadou B. Ibrahim and Destiny Grace Weber are winners of this year's Mount Cameroon Race of Hope. Ladies and gentlemen, those were the headlines. Good afternoon. You are welcome to the 2 p.m. news on Royal FM with me, Mapalazita. We begin with politics. 2026 marks 20 years since the launch of the Operation Sparrowhawk, a bold crackdown on embezzlement at the highest levels of government. Two former senior officials of the regime and pioneer defaulters regained their freedom last Saturday, February the 21st, 2026, after spending 2 decades behind bars. Gilles-Roger Belinga, former Director General of the Société Immobilière du Cameroun, SIC, and Gérard Ondondo, former Director General of FECOM, were released after serving sentences linked to the much publicized anti-corruption campaign. Their release has brought relief to their families and close associates. Yet beyond the personal joy lies a deeper national concern. After 20 years in prison, what has become of the public funds at the center of their conviction? Our reporter Ngang Nadesh spoke to some political actors and compiled their reactions for the 2 p.m.
Critics have argued that the Operation Sparrowhawk, launched in 2006 by President Paul Biya, is politically motivated, targeting opponents and potential rivals in the sector. Chi Diodene of the Social Democratic Front.
One of the main problems about this Operation Sparrowhawk is that some people who could have been caught by the very Sparrowhawk are the ones giving directives to the Sparrowhawk as to who it should catch and who it should not catch. At that point, it becomes more of a witch hunt operation that permits people to settle political scores or put some people in prison to save face.
Nsangun Jikam of the Cameroon Democratic People's Movement Party expresses that releasing the individuals involved, considering their age, could be seen as a humane approach to balance justice with compassion.
Seeing them at their age being released was something positive, because whatever be the crime of someone, I believe that pardon is always the best option, and seeing somebody suffering at that age is always very painful and it's always very disheartening. Even though we have to discourage those type of behaviors, because embezzling state fund is not something to be encouraged, not something very good.
The political actor stresses the need for clear communication from the authorities about updates on the reforms and information about the recovered funds.
We do not know whether they were left with the money or what happened in the whole of that place. We are at this case now waiting for a clear and clean communication from the that B that will tell us really what happened. Have the money been given back? We hope that in the days ahead we are going to have a clean and portable communication, proper, and where everything will be detailed about these two that were freed and the situation of the remaining ones.
Chi Diodene once again raises concerns about the lack of accountability, questioning the system that allows politicians to embezzle with minimal consequences.
What therefore is the interest of a common Cameroonian when someone is taken and put into jail and the money that he or she embezzled is not recovered and recovered even with interest? What will deter people from embezzling when they know that they can embezzle, find a way to hide the funds and just go stay in prison and come out after a number of years? Or even if they do not come out, they allow the money for their family members to enjoy. What therefore would deter people from embezzling?
In a nutshell, the freedom of the two former officials is not in itself an injustice, as 20 years in detention is a significant sentence in any legal system. However, the real test of an anti-corruption campaign is not measured in years served, but in funds recovered, projects completed, and public funds restored.
In more political news, Professor Maurice Kamto, president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, the MRC, has condemned the retention of Anise Ekane's corpse by the state's authorities. Maurice Kamto, through a communique signed on February 21st, called for the release and handover of the late Ekane's remains to his family to be given a befitting burial. Now, given that Maurice Kamto recently resigned from Ekane's Manidem party after failing to stand as candidate in the October 2025 presidential elections, what could be the political significance of this outing? Answers in this report by youth and education reporter Glory Ngange, who spoke with a political analyst.
Anise Ekane was arrested on October 24, 2025 in the aftermath of the 2025 post-electoral crisis. He endorsed Maurice Kamto as flag bearer of the African Movement for New Independence and Democracy Manidem Party before his candidacy was being rejected by Elecam and the Constitutional Council. Political analyst Isidore Parcom says Kamto's outing is a proof of fraternity.
They were forced all together before leaving. So I think his outing to decry or denounce the state confiscating Mr. Ekane's corpse is quite relevant because it is a political collaborator. So therefore, you have to stand by his person no matter he's no more, whether life or death. It is very normal for him to give his support.
Given that Professor Maurice Kamto resigned from the Manidem and resumed as the president of his former party, the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, the political analyst suggests the outing can also serve as a friendly bridge.
It's a kind of a peace process where he needs to, to fraternize with his political counterpart. So in my observation from Professor Maurice Kamto's outing too, it's not bad. He's trying to show support to the ancestors. The ancestors, you and I know that they are the living dead. Our relatives who have gone beyond. And Professor Maurice Kamto, knowing that Ekane is a living dead, who has once shown favor to him by endorsing him as a political candidate, have that possibility of showing his trust and faith to him once more.
As concerns the withholding of Anise Ekane's mortal remains by the government, Isidore Parcom states,
on the side of the government, we also need to know that government is doing everything to maintain peace and order, because confiscating his corpse means they are taking procedures on how to see or to give him a kind of a befitting burial. Ekane was a statesman, and being a statesman, the state have to actually do what it takes to give him what he deserves.
In addition to the demands for the release of Anise Ekane's corpse since the 1st of December 2025, the professor also asked for an immediate liberation of detainees of the 2025 post-electoral crisis.
Glory Ngange in that report. And still to come in this newscast, we will be talking with Cameroonians on the difficulties in finding a suitable spouse recently and the increase in divorce cases. Welcome back. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to the 2 p.m. news on Royal FM and watching us live on YouTube at Royal FM Cameroon. Cameroon is seeking to foster economic growth through the concept of productive municipalities through a newly signed agreement with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and the United Councils and Cities of Cameroon, the government seeks to bring agro-processing industries closer to production zones. But in the face of ongoing challenges in transforming the national economy, questions remain about how such initiatives can deliver tangible results. Jeffrey Tachum spoke to an economic expert and compiled the following report.
Cameroon turns to its municipalities as new engines of economic growth, with authorities launching the concept of productive councils aimed at transforming local agricultural potentials into real value. In this regard, experts say this is a strategic move by the local government. Valerie Asundeb, economist.
Bring agro-processing industries closer to farming areas instead of exposing raw agricultural products like cocoa, cassava, maize, or palm oil. Municipalities will host small and medium-sized processing units. This approach could reduce post-harvest losses. It could create local jobs and increase farmers' income and strengthen value chains within the country.
But then, just how sustainable and beneficial is this initiative? Some factors will need to be considered for it to be successful, still according to the experts.
The success of this initiative would depend on several factors. First one is access to financing. The second one is infrastructure such as roads and electricity. The third one is good governance at the municipal level. And the fourth one is strong private sector involvement. Without these, the concept risks remaining a policy ambition rather than an economic breakthrough.
On the other hand, Henry Kwam totally believes that this project, which he points out some possible benefits for local populations.
The initiative signed by the councils and UNECA is good because UNECA can provide economic intelligence, data, fact-based research to help support decision-making and to ensure that councils have the capacity to implement projects that align with the attainment of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's important to note here that 40% of Cameroonians live below the poverty line.
As Cameroon develops this new development model, the success of productive municipalities will largely depend on effective implementation and adequate investments.
And on to something else. In the society today, marriage is becoming more and more difficult, and divorce cases more recurrent. This raising questions surrounding the education of children on matrimony as they grow. Some parents have been sharing their opinions on the possibility of schooling children on marital affairs in a context marked by many failed relationships. They spoke on the microphone of Glory Ngange in this Vox Pop.
In as much as parents want to caution and see their children end up in marriages, it's equally important to prioritize the happiness and the mental health of their sons and of their daughters. They must be able to let them understand what it takes to keep a happy marriage, but they must not force their children to stay in marriages that have kept them unhappy and to stay in violent marriages. It may equally vary from home to home or at different backgrounds or at different upbringings.
Many ladies have missed the point. The Bible is telling us in Proverbs chapter 18 verse 22 that he that findeth a good wife findeth a good thing and obtains favor from God, which means a wife material is that one that while in a relationship she behaves like a wife, she does not behave like a lady. You are there to place yourself as he who has already entered into marriage.
Mostly what kills many homes now is unfaithfulness. So all we can say to our female children is trying to be faithful to your partner. And now nobody in marital houses want to bow to the other, of which even a man doesn't have a job, he remains a man of the house. Us women, we don't agree. I can't advise my child to go and get married to a man when you are not working. But then when you are working, you have to still know that the man of the house remains a man of the house.
One of the most effective ways that parents can educate or teach their children in marital activities is already transmitting their marital experience to them, which means that it can give them a background, the challenges that they face in marriage, so much so that before a young lady or a young man is getting into marriage, he should be aware of the kind of challenges that he's going to face.
We stay within the society where a military officer has reportedly shot one of his neighbors who came to separate a fight between the officer and his wife. The recent shooting involving the military officer has raised questions about the legal duty to assist people in danger. Cameroon's laws require citizens to help or seek help for someone facing serious harm. However, this legal obligation can be life-threatening. Let's now listen to Nelson Lambris, a legal expert who explains the implications of the law and how it balances civic responsibility and personal safety. He spoke on the microphone of our reporter, Jeffrey Tachum.
If somebody is in danger and another person stands by and watching the person without actually assisting the person, it is an offense which is punishable by the Cameroon Penal Code. So the situation where the military man was trying to actually gun down the person who was coming to separate the fight between two Cameroonians. First of all, it's not husband and wife, but two citizens that they were fighting at a level where the woman was bleeding. So the man had all the absolute rights and obligation to assist so that the woman should not be languished in cold blood. And it turns out that the military man actually used a gun on the man. Unfortunately, or fortunately, he did not die. It means that at the end of the day, the military man is going to face the law, and the law will not show mercy to this type of people. It is very, very clear that the man was acting in good faith in order to save a life of a Cameroonian. And the person who is there to incarnate and actually implement the laws of the state actually took the law in his hand in order to gun down somebody who was coming just to save the life of another Cameroonian. It is an offense which is punishable by the Cameroon Penal.
Out of Cameroon, fighting between the Congolese army and the paramilitary AFC M23 has resumed in eastern DR Congo, despite the ceasefire proposed last week by Angola's President Joao Lourenço. Both sides accused the other of violations, with Kinshasa saying the rebels are looking to strengthen the opposition while continuing diplomatic talks. The M23 rebels categorically reject the accusation, insisting that government forces are behind the hostilities of last weekend, citing strikes and ground offensives targeting the oppositions and the surrounding areas. The youngest son of Zimbabwe's late former president Robert Mugabe has been formally charged with attempted murder in a South African court. 28-year-old Bellarmine Mugabe was arrested last week after a 23-year-old man was shot and injured at a property in an upmarket suburb of Johannesburg. He was taken into custody alongside his bodyguard, and neither men have commented on the charges. Bellarmine and his bodyguard also face 2 additional charges, including defeating the ends of justice, which relates to a missing firearm, given that during an investigative search of the property, police found bullet cartridges, but no gun was seen. In the meantime, the victim is in hospital, reportedly in a critical condition. On to one of our lead stories. One of Mexico's most notorious drug lords, Nemesio Oseguera, also known as El Mencho, was yesterday killed in a military raid which has sparked widespread retaliatory violence. El Mencho was the boss of one of the fastest growing criminal networks in Mexico, dubbed Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which is notorious for the trafficking of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine to the United States of America, and staging brazen attacks against the government officials who challenged it. He was killed during a shootout in his home state of Jalisco as the Mexican police attempted to capture him. Cartel members responded with violence across the country, blocking roads and setting fire to vehicles. President Claudio Sheinbaum has called for calm, while schools have been cancelled in several states, and local and foreign governments alike want their citizens to stay indoors. An armed man has been shot dead after entering the secure perimeter of U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida. According to the Secret Service, the man was carrying a shotgun and fuel can when he was stopped and shot by Secret Service agents and the sheriff's deputy. The incident happened Sunday morning when President Donald Trump was in Washington, D.C. We come back with sports after this break. And in sports, let's welcome sportsman Biwa Brian, who is back from Boya. Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon, Mapalazita.
Hamadu B. Ibrahim and Destiny Grace Weber are set to receive a heroic welcome this week in the Northwest region after winning the 31st edition of the Mount Cameroon Race of Hope. In the following report, Biwa Brian, you look at the overall experience, the journey of the more than 600 athletes, and an honest look at the event's organization.
Among 270 senior men athletes and along a 38-kilometer path, Hamadu B. Ibrahim came out on top, winning the race in 4 hours and 24 minutes after taking off from the Moliko Omnisport Stadium, passing through the upper farms to the summit of the mountain and back. Ibrahim, who represented the Afuem Allah Athletics Club from Awing in the Mezam division of the Northwest region, was competing for the third time after previously failing and then rose to the occasion in the just-ended edition.
My first time I came number 9. My second year I came 7 last year. So this year I came first. I thank God for that. For going up, the rest is not difficult, but for coming down, the rest is difficult mostly. That's the way I have difficult. But if I come down to the tar route, it's not difficult because I'm a marathoner. I'm a champion for the marathon.
Beside the newly crowned king of the mountain is Weber Grace, a teacher by profession and assistant referee who crossed the finish line first in the women's category under 5 hours and 24 minutes. The 2026 edition was not the first attempt for Grace, who hails from the Bontong, a small village in the Boy division of the Northwest region, and took 3 months to prepare for the competition.
It's just my second time of going to the mountain after 7 years that I stopped running. So I did not believe, because now there was Tata Karin, there was Galim Bizet, and the others that have been to the podium. But then I was like, God, if God is the one that gives victory, if He decides that it's your year, it's your year.
Beyond the final result, the recently concluded Mount Cameroon Race of Hope has dominated headlines, drawing equal parts of praises for its modern upgrades and scrutiny for its remaining shortcomings. On a positive note, the event introduced several key innovations, most notably a rigorous new anti-doping protocol, where athletes were tested before and after the race, with the prize money now contingent on clearing these tests. Harrison Ashu, a journalist who followed the action from a mobile caravan, likened the atmosphere to Christmas Day, noting that the fresh improvements gave the historic competition a sense of renewed excitement and festive energy.
This 31st edition of the race was different in terms of organization vis-a-vis the previous edition. I think this year the organizers invested a lot in ensuring that Boya becomes alive. I mean, there were a lot of social activities. I observed on Saturday after the race, just there at the Moliko Omnisport Stadium, there were 4 concerts built around that same stadium. And all of those concerts were filled with people. Just like some people told us, it was Christmas in Boya.
Despite the successes, the event faced notable challenges. Joseph Epie, another journalist, highlights critical logistical lapses, specifically pointing out the water stations were not available at every necessary point along the routes. Furthermore, he noted that the identification of athletes during the heat of the competition proved difficult, suggesting a need for better visibility or tracking systems in the future editions.
We have been clamoring that the race becomes professional, becomes global. And I think the fact that most young journalists are unable to identify the athletes from their bid numbers is actually something to talk about, because you have to get to their bid numbers, go on your phone to check if it corresponds. If they can put at least a surname of an athlete on their jerseys, that will go a long way in helping not just the journalists, but also the population to know who actually is coming and in what position.
Brian, you also report that this year's champion Hamadu Ibrahim took over an empty throne, as last year's King of the Mountain was nowhere to be found.
One of the most conspicuous sights at the starting line of the 2026 Mount Cameroon Race of Hope was an absence Hussaini Hassan, the man who stunned the nation with his 2025 victory, was nowhere to be found on the slopes of the hill he conquered just a year ago. In February 2025, the 29-year-old athlete from Kumbo initially captivated the nation by completing the 38-kilometer mountain race in 4 hours and 40 minutes. But subsequent analysis by the anti-doping agencies revealed an abnormal high level of tramadol in Hassan's system during the race, and so the federation stripped him of his title and banned him from all sports competitions for 2 years. The scandal has sparked intense scrutiny regarding the event's integrity, particularly as the disqualification came weeks after Hassan had already been crowned champion and awarded 10 million CFA francs as prize money.
I would be very careful to describe this situation as incompetence without having, full access to the anti-doping process and timelines. Anti-doping procedures are often very complex. Samples are collected during or immediately after competition, but laboratory analysis and confirmation, including the athlete's right to a B sample, can take weeks or even months.
In a recent interview on the state media program, Cameroon calling, Hussaini Hassan defended his innocence against doping allegations. Hassan claims that the medical team on site injected him with painkillers only after he had crossed the finish line and reported physical distress. He noted that the positive test results were not communicated to him until several weeks. Marcel Forche once more.
The real issue here is perception and communication. When an athlete is decorated, paid, and publicly celebrated only for the title to be withdrawn months later, it can raise questions among the public and potentially affect confidence in the competition's credibility.
Notably, the decision announced in June 2025 by the Organisation Camerounaise de la Lutte contre Dopage Sans Sport marks the first time in the race's 30 years history that a winner has been charged with such an offense.
It is now time for me to welcome Olivier Ndema Epo into the studio with a summary of this newscast in the French language. Bon après-midi, Olivier.
Good afternoon, Mapalazita. Il existe désormais un accord entre le CEVUC, en abrégé Communes et Villes du Cameroun, et la mission d'aménagement et de gestion des zones industrielles, MAXI. Il est question de faire des communes et des régions du pays des pôles de production au service de la transformation structurelle de l'économie nationale. Une initiative qui rentre dans le processus de décentralisation industrielle du Cameroun. Hors de nos frontières, le baron de la drogue mexicaine Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes dit El Mencho n'est plus. Il a été blessé grièvement hier dans la localité de Tapalpa, située dans l'ouest du Mexique. C'était lors d'une opération menée par l'armée mexicaine contre le cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación. Le narcotrafiquant a finalement rendu l'âme lors de son transfert par voie aérienne vers la ville de Mexico selon l'armée mexicaine. Sport pour finir, la 31e édition de la course de l'espoir ou l'ascension du Mont Cameroun s'est déroulée samedi dernier à Bouéa. Environ 600 coureurs y ont pris part. Dans les catégories messieurs, dames, juniors et vétérans. Dans la catégorie senior messieurs, le leader est Amadou Bi Ibrahim. Chez les seniors dames, Wirba Mary a franchi en premier la ligne d'arrivée. Chez les juniors, Kari 7 rafle la mise chez les hommes, tandis que Sandrine Chinwen fait de même chez les dames.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the package we gathered for you on today's Royal Afternoon edition, the 2 p.m. news, which received technical assistance from Salomon Isana. Brian Bida took care of the cameras for our social media live videos. Production assistants Jeffrey Tachum, script editing and editorial coaching Abel Bella Samari, central coordination Roger Kiek, our station manager, and general supervision by the Reverend Pastor Bisai Emmanuel Noel. For news editing and presentation, my name is Mapalazita. Thank you all for your kind attention, and you have a beautiful afternoon in the company of the beauty queen who has joined me, Raisa Parker, and she's here for part 2